Welcome back to Inside the System. I'm Jazmine Logan, and I'm joined by Emeritus Political Science Professor Dr. David Kanervo. Today we'll be covering recent news in American politics relating to Robert Kennedy Jr.'s nomination, the lack of FEMA following natural disasters in Knoxville, and the White House's stance on the Gulf of America debacle. So stay tuned. First on the agenda today is the nation's new Health and Human Services Secretary. The Senate confirmed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to the position, largely across party lines. But one notable Republican senator joined Democrats in opposing that nomination, former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. Let's hear from McConnell on why he opposed the nomination. CNN's Brian Todd reports.
It's happened again. Mitch McConnell, so instrumental in getting Donald Trump elected the first time, once a key driver in advancing Trump's agenda, has defied the president. The soon-to-be 83-year-old Republican stalwart voted against the nomination of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be Health and Human Services Secretary, saying in a statement, quote, "I'm a survivor of childhood polio, a record of trafficking in dangerous conspiracy theories, and eroding trust in public health institutions does not entitle Mr. Kennedy to lead these important efforts." Trump was asked about McConnell's resistance.
I have no idea if he had polio. He voted against Bobby. He votes against almost everything now. He's a very bitter guy.
McConnell has now voted against three of Trump's most high-profile nominees, Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, and Pete Hegseth, the lone Republican in the Senate who's gone against all three.
For Mitch McConnell, this is what liberation looks like.
And not just with his votes. McConnell just wrote an op-ed in the Louisville Courier-Journal saying Kentuckians can't afford Trump's tariffs. Trump today brushing off McConnell.
Well, I feel sorry for Mitch. He wanted to go to the end and he wanted to stay leader. He's not equipped mentally.
For the longtime loyal Republican, a late career change of course. McConnell telling 60 Minutes now that he's no longer his party's Senate leader for the first time in 18 years.
I will be more outspoken about things that I particularly care about than I have been in the past.
Also what makes McConnell throw care to the wind, analysts believe, his age, his failing health. He fell twice last week. He sprained his wrist from a fall back in December, and he sometimes appeared to freeze during press conferences. Add to that the fact that he's not yet announced whether he'll run for re-election in Kentucky next year. How is his relationship now with Donald Trump?
We haven't spoken for quite a while. I was very upset about what happened January 6th.
It was that period a McConnell biography.
Dr. Kanervo, how do RFK Jr.'s qualifications for this secretary position compare to those of his predecessors?
The thing that stands out to me about his qualifications is that unlike his predecessors who were very much in line with traditional science and the medical community, Robert Kennedy Jr. has been one of these who has spread statements which really have contradicted traditional medical knowledge and traditional medical positions, particularly on things like vaccines, where he has said that his view is that vaccines are dangerous, that vaccines have in fact perhaps been a cause for autism among children, and those things have been debunked. We know that vaccines are generally very safe, and we know that vaccines have done a world of good in saving children and adults from various diseases, polio, measles, mumps, whooping cough, diphtheria, those sorts of diseases from the past really are, for the most part, no longer in existence in this country, or at least they haven't been up until recently, when we have parents now deciding that maybe Kennedy and some of the other naysayers about vaccines are right, and so they have stopped vaccinating their children.
Exactly, and that is quite unfortunate, seeing all the good that vaccines have done. And you're right, I mean, I have known that RFK Jr. has, been known to spread misinformation about conspiracy theories that have long since been debunked. And I'm curious how you think his assertions that vaccines cause autism, as well as statements like antidepressants lead to school shootings, could affect our healthcare system while he's in this role.
Well, I think we're starting to see that already, in that there are fewer parents who are getting their children vaccinated. There's a news story within the last 2 or 3 days that there's been a measles breakout in 2 states. Again, measles was something which was essentially eradicated, but it has come back because parents are not vaccinating their children. And while measles was a traditional childhood disease that wasn't considered all that serious, at the same time, there have been some cases where measles has led to other more serious diseases, leading children to, in one case, even die. It boggles my mind that parents who love their children would not get them vaccinated and not let them go through this kind of scenario where they get very sick. I think the antidepressants is another issue, as you bring it up, where we have a long history of good antidepressants being successful in helping people get out of the darkness and the depths of depression. And to say that they cause school shootings, I think, is probably not accurate. It seems to me that I would guess the lack of antidepressants actually is more likely to be a cause rather than the use of them.
I agree. I think that we can't ignore that there are people who struggle with mental health and that rely on medicine to help them, whether it's, they have lower serotonin levels than most people. Those antidepressants and medicines have been proven to improve the quality of their daily life. So to use that as a potential reason for a tragedy that is a school shooting, I think is quite unfortunate. I think if we want to combat school shootings, we should start with the weapons, the guns, right? Not the meds.
Right.
Is kind of how I see that.
Sure, that's exactly right. I think that the medicines are, if any cause at all, which I'm very skeptical of, certainly a very, very small part of the cause. There are lots of psychological things along with the availability of weapons that are the real problem, I think.
I agree. And with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. specifically, I have seen him kind of flip-flop on some of his stances as of late. He previously believed that women had the right to make reproductive choices over their bodies, and he said to the Senate openly that at this point he is at the pleasure of our president, and he will align himself with our president on those stances, regardless of his previous beliefs that he held.
Sure. And in line with that, as the president and Elon Musk are going around firing people right now, within hours after being confirmed, Robert Kennedy fired a large portion of the staff in the Centers for Disease Control, those who were involved in the investigation of epidemics. And so there's the real danger that with bird flu and other sorts of things going around, that those epidemics could in fact become either more common or more widespread because of the lack of people on the ground to investigate these diseases more carefully.
I agree, and especially with, like you said, the bird flu has been coming back around and other diseases. I am worried about the potential repercussions of these decisions, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens over the next few weeks and how it all plays out.
Right.
Well, we'll be right back after this short break to discuss the lack of disaster funding in Knoxville.
Wherever you see a flower, a bird, a beautiful tree, know that my love is with you as you bring our colorful stories to the world.
Make the forest part of your story at a park near you. Find one at discovertheforest.org.
A Tennessee town is still cleaning up after a deadly tornado earlier this month. Now local officials in Wartburg area are concerned funding from FEMA may not be coming. Sam Luther reports.
Neighbor helping neighbor and friend helping friend, and everybody just jumping in and doing what they can, and that's what makes this county so special.
In Morgan County, Brian Langley has seen how people have helped each other in the aftermath of the storm. To get federal funding to help those impacted, Tennessee would need to show they had more than $13 million in damages.
For FEMA's qualifications, we're not going to meet that, and it's going to be, sad.
Despite 39 homes being damaged or destroyed and 2 people dying from the storm, Morgan County likely won't get help from FEMA.
You tell me those 2 lives don't mean something. They do, and it's frustrating.
Langley attributes it to the nature of living in a rural area and some homes not being as expensive as others across the state.
They're not thinking about the rural, small counties that's not only here in Tennessee, we've got them nationwide, they're all over the place, and I wouldn't trade Morgan County for any place in the world, but a lot of times we do get overlooked, and it's my job to make sure that we don't get overlooked.
In the meantime, he's turning to the state and people like Representative Ed Butler.
I'm working with the governor's folks to see what we can do right now for my constituents in Morgan County.
In some of the areas hit the hardest, a quick check-in goes a long way.
You just go out there and you just, hey, how you doing? What do you need? Just check on them. That means more to them than you would even imagine.
But Langley knows these people will need help financially. With 3 tornadoes in less than 6 months and no federal funding expected, he's hoping to find a way to get help soon.
We want that funding. I don't care how they get it, but there's enough wasteful spending nationwide that they can find some money to help Morgan County. We're going to be asking, and hopefully they'll step through and help up. Step up and help us out.
Langley says a county meeting will be held sometime over the next few weeks to discuss the ongoing concerns following the flood. Dr. Kanervo, President Trump has mentioned the idea of terminating FEMA altogether. How could this affect Americans dealing with the aftermath of natural disasters?
Well, unfortunately, it could have, I'm afraid, a fairly major effect. And FEMA has not always been on top of its game, so to speak. We remember back during the flooding of New Orleans several years ago after the hurricane that FEMA was not as well prepared as it should have been to help save the people in that city. At the same time, however, FEMA has been very helpful, I think, in most disasters since then in providing housing, providing money for maintaining life and food and medicine, so that the people who face that disaster really have someone kind of fighting for them. Mm-hmm. Now, they may not have acted as quickly as some people would like, and they may not have done exactly what some of the recipients of the aid liked, but at the same time they have been there and they have provided aid that they would not otherwise have received. What would replace FEMA, because Trump has talked about ending FEMA completely, mm-hmm. is certainly unclear. One of the suggestions he's made is just letting the states handle their own disasters. And I think that in and of itself could be a disaster for the state, because the states don't generally have the money to do that sort of thing. That's why FEMA and the federal response to disasters have been so important.
I agree, especially like we just saw, even here in Knoxville, Tennessee, they're dealing with the aftermath of tornadoes, and as of right now, they're not getting the help that they need on a national level. So I think if we were to further digress and pull back that support and that funding even more, the consequences would probably be negative.
Right. Now there is some talk that maybe there would be a mechanism for giving some federal money to help the states in disasters, but at the same time there needs to be an agency or some mechanism for doing that. So I could see certainly reforming FEMA if FEMA has problems, or increasing the staffing of FEMA to help them respond more quickly, what it might take to get FEMA more effective. But eliminating all the financial help, it seems to me, leaving it simply up to the states to get by the best they can, is a real problem, particularly when we have states whose legislatures, like Tennessee, don't meet for very long. Generally, our legislature here in Tennessee meets from January through April, and then they're out.
Exactly. So it doesn't seem like just throwing it back to the states is going to be sufficient enough.
Right, that's right.
You know, our President Trump, has referred to FEMA as slow and totally ineffective. Do you agree with that assertion?
I don't, well, slow, of course, is in the eye of the beholder. It seems to me that in recent years, what FEMA has done is preset their resources closer to where storms were coming, for example, hurricanes, and so that they would be prepared and able to respond actually more quickly once the storm had passed. Now, there may be some slowness in the paperwork, certainly. The lines of needing to get to one of their agents to get help, but that's a matter of having enough people available to help them all quickly enough.
Exactly, and so limiting FEMA's funding or even their workforce probably isn't going to speed up their response time. We'll have to see how the president decides to handle this issue moving forward and how this is going to affect FEMA's response to these natural disasters.
That's right.
But we'll be right back after this short break to discuss how changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico is affecting the press. So stay tuned.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzz and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
Thanks for sticking around. To close out our segment today, we will be talking about President Trump renaming the U.S. southern coast as the Gulf of America. This name change has led to quite the debacle involving the Associated Press. AP journalists have been barred indefinitely from presidential events for continuing to use the Gulf of Mexico, while adding Trump's decision to their style book. Let's hear from White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt on the Trump administration's stance. CNN's Caitlin Collins is asking the tough questions.
Which White House official made the decision to bar the AP reporter from the Oval Office and the diplomatic reception room last night?
Well, first of all, let me just set the record straight.
It is a privilege to cover this White House. It's a privilege to be the White House press secretary. And nobody has the right to go into the Oval Office and ask the President of the United States questions. That's an invitation that is given. And there are hundreds of outlets on this campus, many of you in this room who don't have the privilege of being part of that pool every single day and getting to ask the President questions. We reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, and you all have credentials to be here, including the Associated Press, who is in this briefing room today.
But isn't it retaliatory in nature is the argument, because there's a reason that the AP was barred, which they said was because they're not using the phrase Gulf of America, they're using Gulf of Mexico in line with their standards. And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is. The Secretary of Interior has made that the official designation in the Geographical Identification Name Server. And Apple has recognized that, Google has recognized that, pretty much every other outlet in this room has recognized that body of water as the Gulf of America, and it's very important to this administration that we get that right, not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world.
Dr. Kanervo, how does this decision align with the First Amendment, which includes the freedom of speech and press?
The White House has a long history of allowing the press to be involved in its events, to distribute information about them to the public. And so this really is an unfortunate decision, I think, by the White House to keep the Associated Press reporter from attending at least 2 White House events. This punishment for not following along with the president's kind of unusual practice of renaming long historically held objects really strikes really an odd tone, it seems to me, to have the Gulf of America announced suddenly as a replacement name for the Gulf of Mexico, which has been used for 300 years, 250 years at least. And so, and for an AP reporter to not fall in line behind that really is a violation of his freedom of speech, and also the freedom of the press to make the statement that they want to make. He essentially was saying, well, it was kind of silly to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and yet he's punished for it. That's, I think, an inappropriate punishment.
I agree. Do you think that the White House will continue to try to regulate the language used by independent media outlets?
I'm afraid so. It seems to me that kind of in line with the White House wanting to control things that go on around government and related to government, that there are going to continue to be punishments handed out to media folks who don't fall in line with what the White House says to do or says to say. And I think that's bordering on being dangerous.
I totally agree. You know, as reporters, it is their duty to be objective and inform the public on the truth. And so if the White House does overstep in the sense of trying to regulate the verbiage being used for reporters, I think that is an overreach.
Right. The Associated Press, of course, as you know, as a reporter yourself, has a style book which serves as a guide to other reporters.
Exactly.
And for the AP to set the style is really important so that reporters are literally on the same page in regard to how things will be stated or how things will be spelled or how things will be punctuated. And so for the President of the United States to say that what this style-setting group of people are doing is inappropriate and to punish them for it really is goes beyond, I think, where the president should be and what he should be doing in regard to trying to control the media.
I agree, and the Associated Press specifically has a long time been known as a credible source to get news information from. They take that very seriously. You're right, they do have their guidebook and they follow those guidelines strictly. They aren't really politically aligned, whether it's Republican or Democrat, so there doesn't seem to be some sort of ulterior motive, in a sense, for them maintaining the name Gulf of Mexico while adding that additional name that has just surfaced.
Right. Well, the Associated Press, I think, sees itself as a general press outlet. It does cover the world, and because it covers the world, the rest of the world still recognizes the Gulf of Mexico. President Trump does not, but that doesn't mean the rest of the world is wrong.
Exactly. They don't just inform
the AP,
Americans.
That's right. And AP wants to stay with the rest of the world.
That is their audience, right? Not just the U.S., but globally.
Right.
So what do you think of White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt saying that using the term still Gulf of Mexico is spreading lies?
Well, I wouldn't call it spreading lies. It's seems to me it's using the historical name, and I don't think that's a lie. It has been the truth for 250 to 300 some years, and so to say it's a lie, I think, is an unfortunate use of words.
I agree, and that was used in her justification, speaking on behalf of the White House, for barring the Associated Press, which is quite unfortunate that this is what it's come to.
Sure, exactly.
I don't know if they'll maintain this decision moving forward or if they will choose to backtrack and allow the media to do its job, but we'll have to see how this administration chooses to continue handling these types of conflicts.
Well, that's right, and I guess the danger for me is if there are other disagreements between the press and the White House in regard to what to say, whether it's an opinion, whether it's this happened or that happened, or as Trump so frequently says, this was a fraud or that was a fraud, when he's critical of something, when in fact it hasn't been legally determined to be fraudulent, and the press notes that. Does that mean then that because you don't parrot what the White House says, that you're going to be barred?
Well, we're going to have to see how this situation continues to develop. I hope that's not the case, but we don't know anything for sure. Unfortunately, guys, that is all we have for you today. Thanks for tuning in for another edition of Inside the System. We hope you guys have a great week, and we will see you next time.